Good morning. Thank you. It's certainly an honor to be here. Let's just briefly touch on what family offices are, because surprisingly enough, the definitions in the industry are really just beginning to come together, and there's tremendous disarray in just what these things are. As a general proposition, it's a business enterprise that's managing, controlling, and administering the affairs of the family. But there's all kinds of varieties and flavors of these things out there. Fledgling family offices are typically a legal structure, and almost everything is outsourced, but it's a very powerful entity in that it controls everything that goes on and really serves a quarterback function with respect to the legal structures, controlling the investments, controlling what happens to the entire family over the long haul. And so the virtual family office, as it's called, is really often a fledgling family office where everything is outsourced. However, there are virtual family offices in place for billionaire families that literally, there's a family in Iowa that has one CPA and one attorney, and that is the family office. And everything is outsourced. And they are largely administrative management staff, while all the services are bid out nationwide to whoever they deem appropriate. And so it doesn't necessarily tie to the size of the family or the size of assets under management, but as a general rule, a virtual family office is a smaller family. And the thought was that you would never really put one of these in place until a family was at the $100 million in investable assets level. Well, that thinking's long gone. At this point in time, because things have become so much more cost effective because of technology in large part, and because the tax rates all across the board have risen to levels never before seen on the planet. The effective tax rates today are significantly higher than the tax rates were 20, 25, 30 years ago. We had 90% brackets and 70% brackets, much less the 50% brackets, which I thought were very painful at the time. We're paying more tax today because the basket of income has grown wildly, and the basket of deductions has contracted wildly. And so the net result is the level of tax is extraordinarily burdensome. It is, in fact, the highest level of taxation on the planet. And the bad news is it's going to go up even further. Amazingly, many family offices have no legal structure. It's just sort of there. And that in itself is a huge problem. And I want to touch on that for just a minute, because most advisors don't realize how problematic that is, or even the families themselves. And the idea is that most of these families got their wealth from one or more operating businesses. That's typically the genesis of a family. These are not doctors and lawyers and accountants and financial advisors. These are people that own businesses and took business risk almost across the board. People who win the lottery don't end up with family offices. It just doesn't work that way. And so what usually happens is that it emerges by the practices of the family. And the families get very accustomed to using the in-house counsel to do their wills and trusts and contracts, and they use the in-house CPA to do their tax return. And the personal assistant is booking vacations and picking up laundry, and they've got a room in the company plant where they're storing all the files and records, all their personal records, the real estate closings, the wills and trusts, the tax returns. And what does that mean when there's no entity? It means a world of hurt. It is a huge problem. Forming the legal structure for defensive purposes at that level is absolutely critical, because everything they're doing is a massive legal problem, and in many cases fraud, and in some cases felonies and ERISA violations. If you think about it, it's unintended, it's inadvertent, because it's how we've always done business. Well, now we've got outside shareholders. We've got banks with loan covenants in our contracts. We've got profit sharing plans and qualified plans. We've got executive compensation with profit sharing. And so what ends up happening is you've got breaches of fiduciary duty as an officer, director, and shareholder of the company. You've got breaches of the employment agreement, breaches of company policy. You've got usurpation of corporate assets and corporate resources for personal purposes, which in turn is typically deducted on the tax return, which now means you filed fraudulent tax returns. A huge problem in and of itself. You have now taken money available for profits that could have been used for a profit-sharing plan or to pay people bonuses, so you've violated all your employment contracts. You've violated every ERISA plan, which carries with it punitives, treble damages, and attorney's fees. Very, very serious stuff. So at the end of the day, to not have a structure accounting for and paying for these expenses is a massive problem, and it has no relationship to the size of the expenses. So even a relatively nominal amount, a couple $100,000, cast in its worst light is an absolute nightmare. And when the families are more significant, it's a huge, huge problem. And I was literally asked by an executive inside a major multifamily office with offices in many cities. He said, so just to be clear, should every single family office have a legal entity? And I said, absolutely. It is not a close call. But the fact that he asked the question really took me aside.